Welcome everybody. I think folks are coming on in. So thank you for popping in to hear about esports. See if a few of the folks show up on the screen here. What's up, Eduardo? Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Brandon?
Man, it's a good day today, I think.
Yeah, I love your room.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, it's a labor of love, but as a gaming guy, I try to stay true to it. I'm actually more of a retro gamer by heart, but it works.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool. So we've got people pouring in here, which is cool. Get started here in probably just like 1 minute. I'll let people continue to kind of come in as we go. So welcome to Joe and Crystal, Jessica, Mike, Olivia, Zach. Welcome. Hopefully it's been a good tech week. I realize we're at the very end of our tech week time pretty much. But I always like to do things on a Friday, and over lunch, who doesn't want to talk about gaming? So we'll jump straight into it here in a minute. And I do have a little presentation to share with you guys, but I will say I am a big fan of interactivity and of questions. I'm always very curious, when people come to some of the work that we're doing to share about gaming and about esports. I always love to know the where, the when, the why. So please, at any time in the chat or pop on the video screen, just say, hey, I've got a question. I'd love to cover it. I'm going to try to cover just like some very basic things about just generally the esports industry, because I usually find, depending on who's attending, it's always like a helpful just kind of like review of what does it mean, what is it, and then we'll specifically talk about kind of Wisconsin as the title of sort of today's presentation would denote. But again, anywhere along the way, please stop in and just ask a question, because interactivity is way more fun than me pontificating, even if it's about gaming, thank God, versus some of the other things we all sit through that take a really long time. So seeing that it's 12:02 and we got quite a few folks here, I'll kind of jump into it. So I'm going to share my screen. I said I'm going to try to keep an eye on on the people entering, and also on if there are any questions. So hopefully on your screens, what you should see is esports, how video games are exploding in Wisconsin. If that isn't the case for some reason, again, let me know. But we're going to talk a little bit just about what it is, some of the growth expectations and things that we're seeing in the industry, because I think that's very interesting. And then we'll jump into kind of what Wisconsin's esports ecosystem looks like. Talk a little bit about what we do, because sometimes that's helpful just to kind of understand as an organization how we operate and the things that we work on. And then, I am hoping because you're here, let's have some Q&A. Let's talk about it, but just getting involved, because the most fun part, I think, is getting involved in this. And whether it's your organization, whether it's yourself, whether it's your kids, just kind of trying to dive in a way that makes sense for your life. So we'll start out with just kind of what are esports. I'll try to breeze over this stuff. So again, stop me, raise your hand if for some reason this is really what you wanted to know, because the industry is unknown to you, or maybe it's something that you'd like to get more intel on. But we start with the basics. So what is it? The highest level I can describe it is people playing highly organized competitive video games, right? So that's done on PCs, consoles, mobile devices. You see people on their phones. You're familiar with Xbox, PlayStation. PC builds are becoming increasingly popular. So that's typically where this is done. People are playing multiplayer battles, single person first shooters, reconstruction virtually in VR of real sports that we play today. So just kind of a high level overview. That's when we talk about esports, what we're talking about. And primarily it's the competitive nature, as you would see in any other sport. It's not just kids playing games. I think that's always a really important thing to mention. Because a lot of times there's a stigma, or maybe people may think, oh, it's just my kid playing on his console at home. It's a big business. Just some data to reflect that. On the revenue side, so we're looking to surpass about 1 billion in revenue here in 2022. Estimates would put that around 3.5 billion by 2025. We all know how revenue estimates can be, but I really think when you look at the demographics and you look at the growth, even here locally, particularly globally, there's a lot to support that data. I think it's always interesting to just sort of understand the economics of esports, because if you do get into this, you're going to learn down the line just how do people support this? How do people make money in this? So media rights, live event ticket sales at tournaments, merchandise is huge. People actually buying the things in game that they're playing, and then winning tournaments. You may have heard and seen, and I believe we have the general manager might have popped in on our call today of Bucks Gaming. They just recently won the NBA 2K 5v5 championship, and for their efforts were awarded $500,000. So I always think it's a really cool story locally. So I will be sharing it till I'm blue in the face. But just as an example, of how that revenue works, we have a local example here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin of the NBA 2K 5v5 champs, which is pretty cool. I think it's really important to know primarily today, esports as an industry is largely funded through sponsorship. So whether it's locally or at a national level, if you're familiar with FaZe, 100 Thieves, some of the organizations, sponsorship covers a lot of their operating costs and above their revenue model. So it's just, I think, something to keep in mind as you learn more about it. It's an important thing to keep just in your peripheral. On the demographic side, so I just thought it's interesting to list kind of where things are most popular and how we kind of see that split. So maybe unsurprisingly, if you're familiar with it, if you're not, kind of maybe different than you might expect. Asia Pacific, North America, and Europe are the top 3 esports markets. Asia Pacific is by far and away the most prominent when it comes to the industry globally, followed by Europe, and then probably third I would put North America. So we're at, I would say, still a very infant phase as a country in our adoption of esports, which is both very exciting as well as presents its challenges. So just as an FYI and kind of where that's hitting, just some interesting kind of commentary on the future, right? So we're looking at right now mobile becoming more and more increasingly popular. You'll see this already taking place in other countries, but there's an expectation that gaming will continue to move into the virtual reality, augmented reality mobile space. And so I think that's just kind of worth noting if you're thinking about where is this going in the future. I mentioned that it's not, just kids playing games, that it's big business, but I do think it's really pertinent to note that the changing viewership and changing demographics in the younger generations are skewing away from what we might consider our traditional sports viewership. Where they are going, their eyeballs as well as their time is into gaming or esports. This was just a New York Times article that came up the other day that talked about, step aside LeBron and Dak and make room for Banjo and Kazooie. So I think it's indicative, it's somewhat, I think, fun in spirit, but I think it really is relative to how kids and how the next generation really is thinking about gaming and computers and virtual technology. It's a big deal to them. So as a parent, that's actually why I got into this space, because I wanted to know more about it. And then I uncovered this incredible world. If those of you are out there right now who are parents, you probably have questions. We do a lot of work at the Alliance to try to help with parents in that way. But I think it's important to know that obviously if you are a parent, you see this in their lives every day. I just wanted to touch on one thing because I did see, just in the pre-registrations, we've got, business folks, we've got a lot of people who are from different walks of life in the community. One of the exciting parts about the industry, aside from the gameplay, is the opportunities it's providing in the job front. And so if you look at this graph right here, I thought it was indicative and just kind of helpful to illustrate, hey, here's what we're looking at for career pathways. It's broad, it's diverse, it's very unique. And so there's a lot of work being done, particularly in the state of Wisconsin, really all around the country, to sort of illustrate and get people into these jobs, which I think is really important, because the more that we can evangelize that there's a career possibility through this, the more that we can evangelize that, playing a game, learning through games is a part of the new ecosystem, the more it seems to be gathering steam. I'll just use an example of, in many cases, people talk about STEM education, and it's such a critical part of our tech community growth in infrastructure. We learned something the other day that, we always want more coders, we always want more engineers, we always want more scientists, right? But sometimes it's still difficult to get people into those fields because they're hard and because they're not always attractive. But something we've stumbled upon through some of our workforce development efforts is for coding, for example, if you can gamify it or teach people coding through gaming, all of a sudden a lot more hands are raising and people are getting a lot more interested in that career pathway. As an example, we have a partner who teaches Python coding using Rocket League. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's really important that people can see that this industry and that this space has a lot of different facets to it. Just wanted to mention that. I'll jump in now and I'm actually going to share my screen on a different piece. But just before I go on, any questions or anybody that's jumped in late, anything I can help clarify or any additional points that we've covered thus far that maybe we could have some additional dialogue on? If not, I'll assume I've done a great job of describing esports to you, and now we can jump into how things are progressing in Wisconsin. Again, throw it in the chat, hop on video, say hey. It's always more exciting when we're doing this interactively, at least for me. So I'm going to share my screen here so we can jump into, now that we've learned a little bit about the esports industry, let's talk about specifically what's happening in Wisconsin, because I think that's a really cool story. So from our organization, we produce annually kind of a state of esports, if you will. So that's what you're seeing up on your screen. Our first year was last year. We're looking to repeat it here in November for 2022. But what we try to just sort of illustrate is if you had a layman's term definition of what's going on in Wisconsin, here's what we would describe it as. So at the top of the screen, and I apologize, it might be a little small. I might be able to zoom in here. This data is now out of date because it grows at such a quick pace. But essentially, you can think of it as there are middle school leagues and entities, there are high school leagues and entities, there are collegiate leagues and entities, up to professional leagues, entities. You've got venues, you've got other just general population leagues that are taking place, and so on and so forth. So as of this date last year, we were looking at around 82 high school teams with clubs participating during the fall season. I know that number is right now at about 115, if I'm not mistaken. So we've seen a huge increase in high school participation. Scholastic is a driving force behind growth of esports nationally, internationally. So we're really excited in Wisconsin to continue to see that growth as well. On the university front, much the same. So I think as of last year, we cited there were 10 universities. We're up to 28 this year. So if it is not already at, I can say with a surety, because we work with pretty much every university in the state, it's coming, whether it's a club, whether it's a varsity team, whether it's building a facility. Universities are diving into this thing for a number of different reasons. Some looking to be competitive, some looking for enrollment, some just looking to provide their students with an excellent experience. So that's been a really exciting place to grow. On the professional esports organization side, so as I mentioned, Bucks Gaming is our flagship program in the state of Wisconsin by far and away. We have actually seen a number of others, what we call semi-pro teams, or I would call them even aspirationally pro teams, that are diving into specific titles, whether it's Apex, Rocket League, Call of Duty, right? So they're starting and they're trying to recruit local talent to their teams to aspire to end up being something like a Bucks Gaming, which is sponsored, has paid employees, wins tournaments, and that's kind of how their ecosystem flies. So I'd say we have probably 10 of those at this point, whereas last year we had only 4 in total. So we've even seen a great growth there, which has been pretty exciting. On the brick and mortar front, so I mentioned 5 different locations. We're still right at about that. Retail is really hard. In esports, it's hard to find a profit model that works. So we're still continuing to see that develop. I know there's plans for hopefully one in Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee. We've got Tier 1 over in Greenfield, which is an incredible resource. If you're ever interested in seeing what a local land center looks like, stop by Tier 1 in Greenfield. They're a great bunch of guys and they're doing really cool work in their esports community. So I always like to give them a shout out. And then lastly, I would just reference, leagues, right? So we've got people that are running leagues, whether it's Wisconsin Collegiate Rocket League, Midwest R6, which is a Rainbow Six component. We've got Wisconsin Smash. There's a lot of local, I would call tournament organizers and people working together to put on tournaments and to put on leagues for those titles. So again, put any questions in there, but I would just think if I'm describing it, and it's the first time you're getting exposed to it, it's just important and fun to know. There's just a wide variety of things taking place in the state of Wisconsin, let alone nationally, around esports at our high schools, our colleges, and all around kind of the ecosystem. So that's the thing that I would say is probably the most interesting to note. We've cited some stats here. I will say these include data from the game development side. So we have a really awesome game development culture, particularly in Madison, leading the way there with a number of indie game dev shops, as well as some of the bigger ones that people are familiar with. So a lot of, I would say, the output that you're going to see there is driven by our games industry. And then we just kind of note here at the bottom some of the popular games going on around. So Overwatch, and this is from our high school association, Super Smash Bros, Rocket League, Smite. I'd wager that Smite has grown since last year. We have to get that data still. But there's a lot happening just kind of around the Wisconsin ecosystem. There's a bill right now that's been sort of on the table to help inspire innovation at high schools, to provide innovation funding for high schools to create more esports teams. As I mentioned, the growth has always been meteoric in participation. It is not always accompanied by a growth in funding, right? And so at the high school level, there's a lot of participation and a lot of want to play. There isn't always yet the shift to we're going to hire a coach or an assistant coach. We're going to have a facility be present. And so there's a lot of opportunity still there that we're trying to work with. So I guess I'll stop there. Any questions or anything around just the state of esports in Wisconsin? Because I know that was the title of this presentation. And also just, I think, something that, I wanted to make sure people were clear on. Any questions or anything we can touch on there?
I have a question for you. The world's most popular sport is soccer. So have you gotten involved with FIFA, or have you gotten requests for FIFA involvement?
That's a good question. I would say like the FIFA, the Maddens, like some of the more pro sports franchise, maybe a 2K. Less so though 2K because they already have the pro league. But we don't see, I would say, a lot of competitive leagues or competitive things locally for those. You'll see some tournaments one off now and again, but they don't
Right.
seem to drive, I would say, the type of like repeat leagues, processes, teams locally. It's more so just general gameplay. A good question. And yeah, Mason, you asked the question, no League of Legends. So I would say League of Legends, of course, is incredibly popular, if not the most popular game around besides maybe Dota. They have some unique restrictions and they are starting to loosen them actually around licensing and the way that people can play those games at universities or high schools. For a long time, they were actually captively held by an outside entity or outside high school entity, I should call it. And so that really was a detriment to at least the esports ecosystem grassroots side of things because it was captive. People couldn't play it. I do think they've recently stopped their exclusivity deal. So I know that a few of the high school state association and others are starting to offer it again. It's interesting at the ground level. That's a really difficult game to get into. Right? It requires a lot of hours, a lot of participation. And so I think as we talked about the mobile gaming shift, and a lot of the shifting preferences of players, they're trying to figure that out at Riot and League as well as to how to kind of keep people in that. So definitely a very popular game, a very committed community, but we haven't actually seen it probably as popular in the esports centric system here as other titles. Great questions. Anything else before we jump into kind of the Alliance and what our world is and how we're making some things happen with all this? Okay. So I will reshare my screen, and I just wanted to speak to, because I think it's important, kind of the role that the Alliance plays in the ecosystem today. At our core, our number one job is just to create connectivity between all of those different places that I just mentioned. Culture is incredibly important, but it's built, it doesn't just happen, right? It's not a, if you build it, they will come type of scenario. So our main job is to create intersection points for all those groups, whether it's our Discord, our community Zooms. I'll talk a little bit more about the Wisconsin Esports Summit. But first and foremost, we try to authentically be at the center of the esports ecosystem in primarily Southern Wisconsin. So Madison, Milwaukee, down to Chicago is sort of our corridor that we say, hey, we're going to do everything we can. And we think we can create impact. We also really serve this role for the state of Wisconsin because we have incredible effort, incredible growth happening all over. We just don't call ourselves the Wisconsin Esports Alliance because we don't want to be disingenuous, but there's incredible effort going on all across the state. We partner with whomever and whenever we can, but that's our main job. Secondary to that, we are also working with a number of, I would call it the state's premier partners, businesses, tourism, chambers of commerce, because really there's an advantage to this industry growing in being able to provide more jobs and being able to provide more notoriety. So we are partnered with those groups. You may be familiar with the MMAC, Visit Milwaukee, a Bucks Gaming, you name it, right? So we're partnered with them to try to tell a national story so that we can say to others around the country, hey, bring your tournament here. Think about investing or creating a headquarters here. The Midwest is really, I would call it wide open, but this type of development is happening sort of around us in places like Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Minneapolis has a really strong scene. So we're trying to compete and be known on a national level for what we're doing here in gaming. Just some additional details I kind of riffed off on a little bit of it. So we're working on legislation. We work on talent pipeline development, recruiting, retention for organizations. We do consulting for development of new facilities or new programs. But really, we're just the center of the wheel to try to get you to resources that you may need, depending on what situation you're in. So we always mention that. Something that's pretty exciting. So in the beginning of this year in March, we did the first inaugural Wisconsin Esports Summit. We traditionally aren't really an event-centric team or an event-centric organization, but really we felt we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary here in November, that the time was right to bring together as many of the pieces of the puzzle as we could for the esports ecosystem. And so we did that at the Mecca this past March. You can see some of the data there. Really well attended, super exciting. It was invite only because we want to make sure that we're doing what we charter ourselves to do, which is create connections and get that endemic gaming community together. But that went so well that we're actually in 2023 going to move up a little bit venue wise from the Mecca to the UWM Panther Arena. It's going to be March 6th from 1 to 5 p.m. And I'm mentioning it all to you because, hey, if you're here and you're wanting to learn about gaming or esports, it may make sense that you come check it out and meet and connect with others in the future. And it's going to be a really cool time because of the fact that now we have a little bit of an expanded field, literally, to play on. We're going to have a bunch of virtual reality experiences there. We've got a bunch of gameplay experiences there for PC, console. We're actually going to be running a Rocket League tournament, which is really cool. So we're getting help from the Wisconsin Collegiate Rocket League to do that. But it's going to be really fun. So if it's something that interests you and you think, hey, I'd like to learn more about this thing, we'll have panel discussions, breakout sessions, networking. We just really try to bring people together in a fun way at an event like this. I mentioned partners. These are just some of the ones locally that people might be familiar with, or some logos on there you surely have seen or are familiar. Just thought it's always worth mentioning because this is an example of that. We're really trying to stay local and partner and create a really fun ecosystem. So this is just some of the questions, contact. I know this is recorded. I'll throw some of the data in the chat. But we'd love to connect. Our job is to answer questions and be there for the community, create resources. And so that is our world. And that's my presentation. So we're at 12:21. I think this thing was going to go to 12:30. I would love to learn for those who maybe are available to chat or want to come off screen or open up the mic. Please, any questions? Would love to talk through or learn, hey, why are you here? What about this topic might have interested you other than maybe it was over the lunch hour? But if anyone's willing to share, I would love to learn a little bit more about just kind of who we've got in the crowd and what you want to know about gaming. I mean, I suppose I could call people out, but I don't know if you guys are actually gonna do it. In the interim, so Mason had asked to put the Discord link in there. So I did throw that in there. Discord is a place where the gaming community connects. So if you'd like to stay up to speed on things happening in the region, Discord is a great place to go. I'd also say we have a Game Time newsletter every month that comes out where we talk about local news, we highlight community members, we feature upcoming events. If there's other things that you would like to see, I would definitely recommend just going to the website and there'll be a little pop-up that says, do you want to sign up for the newsletter? Like, please do. We'd love to, send you future information. I did just post the summit link in there. If for some reason you want to learn more about the summit or attend that. Nice to see you, Mike. Thank you for stopping by. What else? Got 7 more minutes at a minimum, so I'll just hang out here. You guys are certainly welcome to roll, but I'd love to answer questions or find out what's on the brain around gaming. Cool. Well, if really no questions, that is totally fine. I'm grateful for you guys to have taken some time out of your lunch hour to learn about this. Please shoot me an email. I think I'll throw my email in the chat as well. I'll just link and chat you guys to death. Follow up. Happy to chat more if you've got questions. Again, I think a lot of times the outreach we get is from organizations or community groups. A lot of people who might be being affected by this, parents who are saying, wow, this is present or it's coming up in our environment more than we might expect. We'd like to get educated and be able to have a resource to help us kind of navigate this and or thrive through it. So if that's you and you're saying, hey, this is really interesting, something that we might want to have more convo on, please reach out at any point and we'd be excited to connect with you all. So we'll give one last call out. Otherwise, thank you guys all for coming. Have a great rest of your afternoon and happy Milwaukee Tech Weekend.